Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening, sending small fragments flying. Lu Xian tilted his head to avoid the debris, then carefully lifted the broken pieces, making sure not to cut his hands on the sharp edges. Yao Wei watched his actions, her eyes widening in shock. Underneath the tile was a thick layer of hardened dust, the kind used for laying floor tiles. But as some of the broken pieces were lifted, chunks of the hardened dust came up with them, revealing a metallic sheen underneath. There really was something hidden down there? She glanced at the dog, then quickly crouched back down to help Lu Xian. After clearing away the tiles and dust, a smooth metal surface was exposed. There was a slightly raised mechanical combination lock on top, covered by a protective casing. It was a combination safe embedded in the ground. Because it was hidden underground, it had escaped looting. But even if it hadn't been buried, it probably wouldn't have been easy for anyone to crack open. Lu Xian knocked on the metal surface. It felt thick and sturdy, clearly made of high-quality material and expensive. Whatever was inside was probably even more valuable. Time for the dog to shine again. Dog, you're up. Lu Xian lifted the protective cover over the combination lock and gave the mechanical dog a command. This dog was incredibly useful. Back at Mazu City Police Station, he had relied entirely on the dog to find guns and bullets in the armory. Yao Wei glanced at the mechanical dog and stepped aside to give it space. The dog moved closer, lowered its head, and aimed its eyes at the combination lock, scanning it. Its eyes flashed with light. 2, 4, 3, 7, 0, 6, 7, 1. Lu Xian read the numbers from the flashes in the dog's eyes and turned the lock accordingly. Click. The lock opened effortlessly. Yao Wei pressed her lips together and gave the mechanical dog a few more glances. But as soon as Lu Xian opened the underground safe, she had no time to pay attention to the dog anymore. She and Lu Xian immediately peered inside. Then they both felt disappointed. Inside the safe were stacks of gold bars. If this were the old world, this would be the hardest currency of all. But now, who knew if it was even useful anymore? Oh well, if it was useful, great. If not, they could use it as throwing weapons. Lu Xian picked up one of the rectangular gold bars, weighed it in his hand, and sighed internally. If only he had found this in his previous life. This safe would have made him rich. What do you think about using these as throwing weapons? He casually asked Yao Wei. Now that his strength had increased so much, tossing gold bars was effortless. They were heavy, packed a punch, and might actually be useful. Yao Wei didn't respond, refusing to comment on his idea. Still unwilling to give up, Lu Xian took all the gold bars out of the safe and checked inside again. Sure enough, there was another surprise. On the side of the safe, hidden behind the gold bars, was a secret compartment. Lu Xian reached in, pried it open, and a black leather-bound notebook slid out. The notebook was thick, its edges darkened and slightly warped, likely due to years of use and exposure to underground humidity. Lu Xian and Yao Wei exchanged glances before picking up the notebook. Opening the cover, the first thing they saw was a personal identification page. The owner of the notebook had neatly written down their information. The first line, Department, Fengzheng County Emergency Water Supply Management Bureau. The second line, Position, Emergency Water Supply Worker. The third line, Name, written in messy, flamboyant handwriting that looked like a stylized signature. Lu Xian barely managed to read it. It said Yao Tan Lai. Same surname as you, Lu Xian remarked, glancing at Yao Wei. Yao Wei didn't respond. Lu Xian flipped through the notebook. It was a work journal, filled page after page with records of water deliveries to different households on specific dates. Then, on one page, something stood out in the top right corner. Delivering water every day. People are freezing to death. Why is Jiang fine? Lu Xian immediately understood. This was a journal from after the apocalypse began. Someone had still been delivering water house to house during those times. He didn't know exactly what had happened back then, but clearly, extreme cold had descended upon the world. Fengjiang County's water pipes had frozen and burst, yet the Jiang area remained intact. Even to this day. He kept flipping through. Household numbers were gradually crossed out. Once crossed out, they never appeared again. More and more names were crossed out. More and more names started repeating. Until the final few pages. Some were torn and tattered, covered in deep, violent scratches that fragmented the last few names. Lu Xian sighed, suddenly recalling the moment he first transmigrated into this world. The vast, desolate land. Only the howling, bitter wind for company. A world devoid of people. Nothing in sight but endless white snow and a gray, overcast sky. Despair sat heavy on his chest, leaving him helplessly furious. The person who wrote this journal must have felt the same way back then. Turning past the ruined pages, he reached an intact entry. Took a lot of gold bars from the bank. Never thought I'd do that. But now that the world is like this, it doesn't matter. Consider it my hard-earned bonus. Heading to the command center to take shelter. I just realized. They knew all along. They've been preparing for years. I used to think, based on the propaganda, that this was just an extreme cold period, that all the preparations were only to get through the extreme cold. But I never expected. They had prepared for something even worse. The closure project at the entrance of Tan Village years ago. It was actually a temporary command center. The fuel standard adjustments and price hikes for gasoline and diesel were also related to this. They were adding something to extend the shelf life of the fuel. We were all kept in the dark. Fuck. But at least I'm lucky. I get to go to the temporary command center. There are plenty of supplies in the command center. We should be able to survive until the extreme cold passes. I'll store the gold bars here for now. Once the extreme cold is over, I'll be rich. We will get through this. Lu Xian had never known that gasoline even had a shelf life. Thinking about it now, it was a good thing people back then had the foresight to modify fuel standards and extend its lifespan. Otherwise, their vehicles would have been useless by now. Noticing that there was more written further in, he flipped to the next page. On the last page, it read, "The road beneath the reservoir collapsed. Came back to die. Fucking hell, why did they only build an access tunnel at Dan Village entrance? Are they insane? Shouldn't have taken the gold bars." Retribution. Chapter 17, Decisions and New Humans. After reading those few lines, Lu Xian and Yao Wei exchanged glances. From Yao Wei's eyes, he could see a hint of surprise. This woman was no longer trying so hard to hide her emotions like before. He lowered his head and flipped through the pages. There was no more text. It seemed that Yao Tanlai, the emergency water supply officer from Fengjiang County Emergency State Water Supply Management Bureau who had written this work journal, had truly fallen into complete despair, given up, and was waiting to die here. There was no corpse in the room, not even bones. No one knew where Yao Tanlai had ended up dying. "Let's go back to the car and leave this place," Yao Wei said. They had already searched the area, and the car was still parked outside. It stood out too much in the village. Yao Wei clearly didn't feel comfortable staying here too long. Lu Xian nodded, picked up the notebook, thought for a moment, then took 2 gold bricks and asked Yao Wei, "Is it okay if I leave these in your car for now?" Yao Wei frowned and asked, "What for?" Lu Xian said, "As hidden weapons." In his past life, he had never held such large gold bricks before, and now he really wanted to play around with them. Since they were just going to be sitting in Yao Wei's car, they wouldn't add much weight or take up much space. Grabbing 2 for the experience seemed fine. Who knew? Maybe one day, in some special situation, they really could be used as hidden weapons. "Suit yourself." Yao Wei didn't refuse him, just said that and walked out. So Lu Xian stuffed the notebook and the 2 gold bricks into his bag and followed her out. The outside was safe. The 2 of them smoothly got into the car, started the engine, and left the village. On the way, Lu Xian asked, "The shelter mentioned in the work journal should be where the last survivors gathered. It might still have supplies. Should we go look for it?" Yao Wei nodded and said, "Okay. In a world like this, how could they pass up any place that might have supplies? Of course, that place might have people and be risky, but they had to at least take a look. If it was dangerous, they could just escape quickly." So Lu Xian pulled out World Atlas 1, opened to the Fengjiang County page, found Tan Village on the map, and pointed it out to Yao Wei. "Tan Village is to the east. We need to turn back. After bypassing Jia Village, we take the road south from the gas station intersection." Jia Village was inhabited, so going through it was definitely not an option. Yao Wei nodded, turned the car around, and made a wide detour around Jia Village, continuing down overgrown paths until they reached the other side of the gas station from earlier. The fuel gauge still showed full, so they didn't need to refuel. They decided to wait until after exploring Tan Village to refuel on the way back, so they didn't stop. Tan village was on the west bank of the reservoir. The road leading west out of the village was flanked by hills that rose to form a natural pass. After passing through the pass, the village stretched along the reservoir's shore, separated from the water by a single road, now overgrown with weeds and in ruins. Yahweh drove along that road. The car swayed up and down, making their stomachs churn. Fortunately, it had been a long time since their last meal. Otherwise, they might be suffering right now. Tan village was completely deserted. They drove through, checking thoroughly, and confirmed it. Being so close to the reservoir, the area was now overrun with mosquitoes, making it unsuitable for human settlement. In the current world, people needed water sources to survive, but they also couldn't camp too close to them. This was something Lucian had learned while traveling south. It seemed to apply to others as well. After passing Tan village, they suddenly noticed a rocky hill behind the village. Stones were piled together, with weeds growing wildly between the cracks, twisting in all directions. It blended in with the surroundings, though its prominence felt a bit unnatural. Yet it also looked like a naturally formed feature. Is this the place? Yahweh stopped the car, stared at it carefully, and asked. They had both read the work journal and were actively searching for anything out of place, which was why they noticed something off about this spot. Others might not have noticed anything at all. Lucian didn't respond. He simply opened the car door and sent out the mechanical dog, Dogsy, go check it out. Dogsy rolled forward on its four wheels toward the site. The uneven terrain made its movements wobbly at times. It even had to rely on the joints in its legs for assistance instead of just gliding on its wheels. Still, at least it no longer looked as ridiculous as before. When it reached the rocky hill, Dogsy stopped and started scanning. After a while, it turned back, and its two mechanical eyes lit up. This is the place. Lucian confirmed. Yahweh glanced back. She saw a corridor between two houses at the village's edge, spacious enough, with a steep slope rising behind them. The slope was set apart from the back walls of the houses, forming a corridor. Without hesitation, she backed the car into the corridor, turning it so it was parked between the houses and the hillside. The two of them got out of the car, walked onto the road, and confirmed that the vehicle was now completely hidden from sight. Only then did they feel at ease. Standing beside the rocky hill, Lucian gave Dogsy another command, Dogsy, check which part is easiest to open. Dogsy scanned the piled stones again, then projected light onto a spot near the inner edge. Yahweh grabbed a shovel from the car. Following Dogsy's guidance, the two of them started digging from the topmost stone. It took considerable effort to pry the first one loose. It was only thanks to their great strength that they managed to dig out the stones. An ordinary person would never have been able to do this. After the first layer, it became much easier. They could even remove some stones without the shovel. If this were the past, moving these rocks would have been impossible no matter how hard they tried. I have no idea why I suddenly became this strong. You too. As Lucian pulled out another stone, he casually asked. Yahweh said, we're already new humans. If we hadn't changed, after all these years, we'd probably look like old folks by now. Lucian froze for a moment. Thinking back to what he had seen in Jgia village and Mazu city. The members of Wolf Gang and Dog Gang. Most of them did look older, some even hunched over. Comparing himself to them, he really did seem much younger. And Yahweh was the first person he had met who was just as young as he was. With constant exposure to the elements and endless hardships, how could people not age quickly? Moreover, both he and Yahweh barely sweated. They didn't need to clean themselves often yet could still maintain basic hygiene, including their mouths and hair. They didn't develop body odor, wouldn't attract unwanted attention from people or creatures because of it, and didn't have to worry about hygiene-related illnesses. It saved them a lot of energy. Thinking about it that way, he and Yahweh were indeed different from normal people. New humans? He asked. Yahweh shook her head and said, I don't really understand either. My mom said it. Lucian didn't ask any further. These questions could only be answered if they found more information in the future. This particular spot was indeed easier to open. After removing 2 layers of stones, a hole was revealed. A damp, cold, moldy stench hit them, forcing them to step back. They exchanged a glance, confirmed that they were both ready, and then crawled inside one after the other. Chapter 18, Silent Shelter. The cave was huge. It was actually a tunnel. It sloped downward, leading to a turn at the end. From the looks of it, the path curved there before extending toward the bottom of the reservoir. But Lucian and Yahweh didn't need to go that way. That tunnel was likely meant for vehicles. Right in front of them, beside the tunnel entrance, a staircase led downward, with a turn halfway. It was only about 20 or 30 steps down. This was meant for pedestrians. The cave was pitch dark. Lucian and Yahweh could only see thanks to the light from Dogsy's glowing eyes. They didn't rush down the stairs. Instead, they stayed near the entrance for a long time. One reason was to move the loose rocks from outside into the cave and erase any traces on the ground, preventing anyone from following them in. Another reason was to observe the conditions inside and determine if the shelter was still safe for people to enter. The shelter was built underwater, meaning ventilation, pressure resistance, and other factors had to meet high standards. After so many years, Lu Xian and Yao Wei weren't sure if the air inside was still breathable or if it was even safe to enter. Lu Xian ordered Dogsy to conduct an environmental scan. Then he carefully used stones to seal the outermost part of the entrance they had opened. After confirming it was secure, he finally felt at ease. Now, their excavated entrance wouldn't be easily discovered, and they could break out quickly if needed, without worrying about being followed. After working in the cave for so long without experiencing any discomfort, their bodies seemed fine, which meant there shouldn't be any issues. So, they descended the stairs, pausing to test the air. Their breathing remained unaffected. The structure below was still intact, and there were no signs of collapse. With that, the two of them felt completely reassured. The tunnel below had a pedestrian walkway. With Dogsy lighting the way, they simply followed the path along the tunnel. The tunnel wasn't too long. After walking for a while, Lu Xian and Yao Wei came upon a lowered rolling shutter. There was also a metal door on the pedestrian side. The metal door had an electronic lock, but after all these years, it was out of power. The lock's core could only be removed from the inside, meaning they couldn't supply power externally. Even Dogsy couldn't do anything about it. With no other choice, Lu Xian and Yao Wei attempted to lift the rolling shutter. Fortunately, their strength was immense. Working together, they actually managed to lift it. They crawled underneath. As soon as they let go, the heavy rolling shutter came crashing down with a thunderous boom. The vibration underfoot made them worry that the impact might cause a collapse. Thankfully, the shelter's interior was solid. The previous collapses had only affected the exterior. The fallen debris outside was simply too massive. The people trapped inside likely lacked the necessary tools and, without a mechanical dog to analyze structural weaknesses, had no way to break through. As a result, this underground shelter had remained sealed until now. Only with Yao Wei and himself arriving was it finally reopened. Was there still anyone inside? Lu Xian wondered as he and Yao Wei followed Dogsy deeper in. Beyond the rolling shutter was a parking garage. Completely empty, not a single vehicle in sight. Lu Xian felt a little disappointed. If there had been a car here, he wouldn't have to keep relying on Yao Wei for transport. He and Yao Wei followed Dogsy through the garage and found a small elevator lobby. But the elevator was out of power, and even if it worked, they wouldn't dare to use it. Fortunately, behind the elevator lobby, there was another staircase leading further down. When they reached the stairs, Lu Xian, for convenience, simply picked up Dogsy, carrying it like a flashlight. Dogsy's glowing eyes illuminated their descent. After several turns, they finally reached the true underground shelter. There was another electronic lock on the shelter's entrance. Luckily, this one was already in the unlocked position. It hadn't been closed. Lu Xian had Dogsy turn off its lights. He entered first to scout the area for danger. Of course, while Dogsy searched, he and Yao Wei stayed by the doorway with their guns raised, providing cover. The inside was empty, pitch black, and eerily cold, like a morgue. Any sound echoed unnaturally loud, as if amplified by a speaker right next to their ears. Even the sound of Dogsy's wheels rolling seemed much louder than usual. Outside, that sound was barely noticeable. Here, it felt like it had an echo. Or maybe it didn't. After a long moment, a light flickered on, glaringly bright. Lu Xian and Yao Wei instinctively squinted, but at least their nerves relaxed a little. It confirmed that the area was safe. Dogsy, come back. Lu Xian called the mechanical dog over. With Dogsy lighting the way, they began their exploration. The first thing they saw upon entering was a vast open space, supported by several columns. It looked like a gathering or dining area. The tables and chairs were scattered in disarray, some overturned. A television hung on the wall, covered in dust. It was unclear whether it still worked. Beyond the open space was a row of rooms. Some doors were open, others closed. The furnishings were minimal. Each room contained 2 sets of bunk beds, one on each side, with a table in the middle. The outer bed frames were backed against cabinets, filling up the entire space. It looked like a dormitory, with each room housing up to 8 people. But it seemed like no one had ever stayed here. The rooms were completely empty. The beds were neat, and all the cabinets were open. Lu Xian and Yao Wei searched each room, opening desk drawers. Empty. If this place has enough supplies, working water and sewage, it could be a good place to stay, Lu Xian said. But Yao Wei remained silent. She just continued checking room after room. Midway through, they found the bathroom. They went inside to inspect it. The sewage system wasn't clogged, but after using the toilet, it wouldn't refill with fresh water. The stored water had been sitting for who knew how long. It smelled moldy and foul. And when they turned on the row of faucets, no water came out at all. Even though they were directly beneath a massive reservoir, right next to an abundant water source. There was no running water. Lu Xian sighed. But Yao Wei simply said, "It's broken." For some reason, Lu Xian felt like there was a hint of relief in her tone. It was faint, almost imperceptible, like she was trying to suppress it. "Yeah, broken." They left the bathroom and continued forward. Another row of dormitory rooms. Completely empty, no signs of habitation. But when they reached the very last room, Lu Xian saw something unusual. On the bed against the back wall, a skeletal corpse lay motionless. The bedsheet beneath it was stained with dried blood. Blackish red, hardened and cracked. On the floor beside the bed lay a fruit knife. The blade was stained with blood, long dried, brittle, and cracked with tiny fissures. "Looks like suicide," Lu Xian said. Yao Wei nodded. Had they taken their own life out of despair, trapped in an empty shelter with no escape? Or was it something else? It didn't really matter anymore. Lu Xian and Yao Wei had no interest in dwelling on the past. In this room, where someone had died, they actually found a decent amount of supplies. Clothing, chocolate wrappers, instant noodle bowls with dried soup residue, and various food packaging. These things confirmed one thing. This shelter did have supplies. Chapter 19, Discovery. This dormitory was in complete disarray. Judging by the state of the deceased on the bed, they had lived in utter despair before their death. Lu Xian didn't find any notebooks or similar items in the room, making it impossible to confirm exactly what had happened before the person died. There was a phone, but its screen was completely shattered, the entire device bent out of shape. Clearly deliberately destroyed. All the food in the dormitory had been consumed. Chocolate wrappers and other food packaging were scattered across the table, along with empty instant noodle bowls littering both the tabletop and the floor. It seemed like this person had eaten everything before taking their own life. Lu Xian could only hope there was something left in the other rooms. Leaving the bedroom, he continued exploring and finally found something different. Ahead was another metal door. When Dog's eyes shone on it, the surface reflected light. This door was also open. Upon entering, the divided rooms beyond were no longer dormitories and were significantly larger in comparison. The first thing the two of them saw was a kitchen, complete with a stove, sink, workbench, pots, bowls, and utensils. Everything one would expect. But this place also seemed to have been ransacked. Pots and bowls were strewn across the floor, and the workbench was tilted, clearly having been moved. Lu Xian and Yao Wei had to tread carefully, tiptoeing over the shattered ceramic fragments on the ground. There was no food left in the kitchen, but in the farthest corner, Lu Xian and Yao Wei discovered something unusual. A skeleton was slumped against a metal door. Unlike the previous remains, this skeleton was still clothed, almost entirely covered by the garments. Judging by the style, it seemed to be a chef's uniform. A chef's hat had fallen onto the skeleton's chest, long since flattened. This metal door was shut tight, its mechanical combination lock firmly secured, sealing off whatever lay beyond. When Dog's eyes shone on it, the door bore dried, blackened blood, forming raised streaks that ran from the door down to the floor. Lu Xian examined the red-black streaks trailing across the door and asked, "How do you think he died?" Yao Wei shook her head. Judging by the dragging marks, it looked like he had been slammed against the door. But the surface was completely flat. There was no protrusion or sharp edge that could have easily split someone open and caused them to bleed to death. However, Lu Xian soon made a new discovery. He found some broken ceramic shards on the ground. They weren't the same shape as the shattered bowls and plates. As he pieced them together in his mind, they resembled a blade. "This is a ceramic knife, right?" He looked at the floor and asked. Yao Wei nodded. "Yeah." Lu Xian let out a slow breath. "He committed suicide too. I wonder which of them did it first." As he spoke, he turned back to the skeleton. Pinned to the skeleton's clothes was a nameplate. Lu Xian had dogged shine its light on it, revealing the inscription, "Chef, Leagues and Clearance Level 3." Yao Wei remained silent. She had no clue and wasn't in the mood to guess. Lu Xian moved the skeleton aside and then instructed Dog to scan the combination lock. There was nothing valuable in this kitchen. If there were supplies, could they be behind the metal door? As Lu Xian's mind wandered, he began to speculate. Could these two deaths have resulted from being trapped here, running out of accessible supplies, and succumbing to despair, leading to their suicides? The deceased Liegzen was the chef, yet he didn't have the clearance to open this metal door. Perhaps that meant supplies were stored beyond it, only accessible to someone with a higher clearance level in the shelter. Could these two have entered in advance to prepare, only to end up trapped here? Without the clearance to access the stored supplies, they used up everything they had, then, in utter despair, took their own lives. Lu Xian didn't bother sharing these speculations with Yao Wei. There was no point. Years had already passed. This was just an empty shelter now. What was the use of uncovering the past? It was better to focus on finding supplies. 5, 8, 7, 9, 4, 1, 7, 9. Dog cracked the code, its eyes flashing in a rhythmic pattern. Lu Xian read out the numbers as they appeared in the sequence of flashes, then turned a mechanical combination lock. With a crisp click, the lock opened. As Lu Xian pushed the heavy metal door, a thick wave of mildew stench surged out. Both he and Yao Wei had to cover their noses and retreat, stepping back a good distance before stopping. Dog, check if there's anything wrong, see if it's safe to enter. Lu Xian instructed. Dog was fearless and immediately shone its eyes into the space beyond. Lu Xian and Yao Wei could now see stacks of plastic crates and shelves behind the door, filled with vegetables and meat. Long since decayed and hardened with time. Nothing useful. Lu Xian sighed. He could guess that this place had been a cold storage room. If the refrigeration had stayed powered, the stored goods might have been preserved. But as things stood, the cold storage had failed long ago, and everything inside was already ruined. Yao Wei also looked disappointed and didn't say anything. Lu Xian quickly shook off the gloom and said, "Let's keep going. There are still places we haven't checked. Who knows? We might find something worthwhile." But just then, Dog, who had stepped into the metal-doored room, suddenly had its eyes light up, casting a beam that reflected from within. Lu Xian's heart skipped a beat. He focused intently, and his expression immediately turned to one of delight. "Wait." He grabbed Yao Wei's arm. Yao Wei had already turned around to leave, but at Lu Xian's touch, she stiffened. Lu Xian noticed her reaction and quickly let go. "Sorry." But Yao Wei shook her head. "I should be the one apologizing. I almost attacked you just now." Lu Xian. This violent woman. At least it was only almost. Yao Wei followed Lu Xian's gaze toward the illuminated area beyond the metal door, where numerous bags were stacked against the wall. The bags were flat and sturdy, packed tightly and stacked layer upon layer. What is it? She had never scavenged anything like this before. It felt unfamiliar, but a sense of hope stirred inside her. Not that it mattered. Lu Xian seemed to know. He always knew. He knew everything. Who knew where he learned all this? Rice bags, or maybe flour bags. No, they should be rice bags. Lu Xian spoke quickly, excitement evident in his tone. Flour can't be vacuum-packed, but these are obviously vacuum-sealed. They must be full of rice. Not contaminated? Yao Wei asked. With so much rotted food inside, the air was polluted. From her experience, anything in this kind of environment was usually inedible. Then she heard Lu Xian say, "It's possible they're fine. Food stored in a vacuum can last an incredibly long time. And since these are vacuum-sealed, it means the contents are tightly sealed off. Plus, we have Dog. If they're contaminated or spoiled, we can just have Dog check." Chapter 20. The more exciting, the more heartbreaking the two of them didn't rush in. Only after Dog confirmed that entering wouldn't pose any risk to their health did they hold their breath and step through the metal door. According to Yao Wei, both of them were already new humans, with physical abilities far surpassing those of the old world humans. Their ability to hold their breath was also much longer, so going in without breathing wasn't a problem. Inside, as expected, there were rows upon rows of vacuum-packed rice. The upper part of the packaging was transparent, allowing them to see the slightly white grains inside. Each one distinct, as if time had left no mark on them, just as fresh as new rice. Lu Xian counted. The rice filled an entire wall, stacked in 5 rows, each row containing 10 bags, all completely intact. This was probably meant to supply the entire shelter. If the number of people in the shelter wasn't too large, it could have lasted quite a long time. But now, all of it belonged to Lu Xian and Yao Wei, meaning it could sustain them for even longer. "Too bad your car can't hold much." Now able to breathe safely, Lu Xian spoke while continuing his inspection deeper inside. Yao Wei followed behind, pressing her lips together as she looked at the overwhelming amount of food, feeling a pang of heartache. Why couldn't her car carry more? Moving further in, they reached another wall. This shelter didn't just store rice. It had flour as well. But since flour couldn't be vacuum-sealed, the stored supply had already spoiled. Unlike the northern regions, where the persistent cold could help preserve food, this place had been exposed to humid, rotting air. The flour had decayed along with the spoiled vegetables and meat, making its deterioration inevitable. Lu Xian was unwilling to give up, so he had Dog scan the flour. But Dog confirmed that the entire wall of flour was completely ruined and inedible. Yao Wei's heart ached even more. Lu Xian consoled her, Don't worry about it. We have to keep moving anyway, and there's no way we could take everything with us, right? Besides, we still have all this rice. Yao Wei nodded slightly and glanced at Lu Xian. Hearing him say that, she knew he was well versed in handling food storage. It was as if this man had come straight from before the world fell apart. He knew so much about these things. But that time was so far away now. He looked so young. How did he know all this? Lu Xian noticed Yao Wei's gaze and turned back to look at her. Yao Wei quickly averted her eyes, looking flustered. Lu Xian didn't ask. Whatever he asked this woman, she wouldn't answer anyway, so he didn't bother. They continued searching. Along another wall near the entrance, 6 stacks of crates and 2 stacks of vacuum-sealed millet bags were piled up. This place didn't just store rice. There was millet too. Lu Xian pointed at the millet and smiled at Yao Wei. Look, more grains. Edible. Yao Wei nodded again, not wanting to speak. Most of the time, she wasn't used to talking, but right now, she truly didn't feel like saying anything. More food they could take. But her car could never carry all of it. The more edible food they found, the more painful it felt. Even more painful than seeing the spoiled flour. Meanwhile, Lu Xian had started inspecting the crates. The crates were clean, unmarked, as if they had been produced hastily with no labels. Lu Xian grabbed one, used his utility knife to cut the sealing tape, and opened it. What he saw inside was a pleasant surprise. The crate was packed full of sealed bags. Inside the bags were vacuum-packed dehydrated vegetables. The people who had taken shelter here had not only prepared fresh vegetables but had also taken precautions by stocking up on dehydrated ones. Excited, he went to the entrance and grabbed another crate from the outermost stack. Opening it, he found it was also full of packaged goods, but instead of vegetables, it was vacuum-sealed sausages. He quickly called Dog over to scan them. Dog confirmed that the sausages were still safe to eat and wouldn't be harmful to their health. We hit the jackpot. Lu Xian turned to Yao Wei with a bright smile. Yao Wei had already walked over and was standing behind him, looking inside. She had seen sausages and dehydrated vegetables before. Having wandered alone for years, there were times when she was lucky enough to find a small amount. But she had never imagined seeing this much at once. What a surprise! Yao Wei pressed her lips together. The more delighted she was, the more her heart ached. Sigh. Lu Xian let out a sigh and said, "Tell me, why is your car so small? If only we had an A1 class vehicle." Yao Wei didn't understand what Lu Xian meant by A1 class, but she understood the rest of the sentence. For some reason, she felt a little ashamed. So much food, and yet she could only take so little. The rest would be wasted. If that wasn't something to be ashamed of, what was? But after surviving in the apocalypse for so long, she wasn't someone who'd dwelled on useless emotions. The feeling of shame passed quickly, and she straightened up. Let's clear this place out, lock it up, and mark it on the map. That's our best option. Lu Xian stood up and nodded. They couldn't take everything, so the best they could do was store it here as a supply depot. If they ever reached a dead end, they could return to this place for food and water to sustain themselves. Without wasting time, they got to work. First, they lifted the shelves filled with rotting vegetables and meat and carefully moved them out to the kitchen. Thankfully, both Lu Xian and Yao Wei had immense strength now. Otherwise, these heavy shelves would have been impossible to move with just the two of them. Even if they could, it wouldn't have been this easy. New humans were really useful. Including himself. Beneath the shelves, there were still unopened boxes of oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar, neatly packed in a row. Before moving the shelves, Lu Xian and Yao Wei set these boxes aside. These were also meant to be stored in the cold storage and would be part of their supply stash for the future. As they moved everything to the kitchen, Lu Xian couldn't help but think. Now the cold storage had been cleared out, and they finally had space to store supplies for later. Then, he grabbed a broom, mop, shovel, and dustpan from the kitchen, and together, he and Yao Wei started cleaning up the scattered debris. The shovel was brand new. Probably meant for cooking large meals. But at this moment, it was perfect for scraping off the dried-up stains on the floor. As they worked, Lu Xian also picked up a flat-bottomed pan, a wok ladle, and a soup spoon from the kitchen and set them aside in the storage room. Yao Wei's car didn't have cookware. But now, with all this rice, dehydrated vegetables, and condiments, these tools would definitely come in handy. Once they finished cleaning, they moved all the spoiled flour out as well. The entire cold storage room now had a huge empty space. Even the musty smell had almost faded, leaving the air much fresher. Both Lu Xian and Yao Wei felt their mood improve. Let's check the other rooms first and let the air clear out. Once we're done exploring, we'll load up the car? Lu Xian asked Yao Wei. Yao Wei had no objections and nodded. All right. Chapter 21, Strength brings miracles. Coming out of the kitchen, they continued further inside, where the space was divided into 2 rooms. One room seemed to be a conference room, with an oval table surrounded by chairs, but it was completely empty. A blackboard hung on the inner wall, with a groove underneath that held marker pens. When the mechanical dog shone its eyes over the board, it revealed a row and a half of numbers. Starting from 1234 in ascending order, all the way up to 37. You wanna guess what this is? Luzin asked. Yao Wei shook her head, indicating that she had no idea. Luzin speculated, there's no one else in this shelter, so this was probably written by those 2 dead people. These numbers. They look like a way to record the days, meaning how long they were trapped down here. Pretty miserable. In his past life, he had only ever seen this kind of thing in prison scenarios, though those were usually tally marks. Numbers like this were a first. But whether tally marks or numbers, Luzin could see the same overwhelming despair behind them. Did those 2 people last for 37 days before taking their own lives? Or by the 37th day, were they so mentally drained that they just stopped keeping track and never touched the board again? His mind drifted aimlessly as he and Yao Wei moved on to check the other room. This room appeared to be an office, much more spacious, with 2 desks set up for multiple people to work. On the desks were computers, printers, and notebooks, all in place. But the notebooks were all blank, scattered messily across the floor. The computers and printers had also been smashed onto the ground. Clearly battered violently. The computer cases were shattered, parts scattered, and the monitor screens were cracked like spiderwebs. Did those 2 people smash them? Luzin could kind of understand. If it were him stuck in here for so long, food running out, no way out, possibly even issues with water and electricity. He might lose it too. The notebooks on the desks and the floor were all blank. Yao Wei picked one up, shook off the dust, and put it into her backpack. Luzin followed suit, stuffing one into his bag. They didn't take more than that. A single notebook wasn't much, but carrying too many would add weight. Even though he was strong now, he wasn't looking to burden himself unnecessarily. He also found about 10 pens on the floor. Picking up a notebook, he tested each one. Most were brand new, ink flowing smoothly. So he packed them all into his bag and asked Yao Wei, "You want any?" Yao Wei took one but didn't ask for more. She was a little puzzled as to why Luzin needed so many. They make great hidden weapons in a pinch, Luzin grinned. Not like I'm keeping them for journaling. Writing a diary was pointless. It just wasted ink and paper. He would never bother with it again. Everything's a hidden weapon to you. Yao Wei muttered. Right now, she still had 2 gold bars sitting in her car, and she had no idea what those were good for. Luzin said, "We've got strength. Strength brings miracles. Everything can be a hidden weapon." Yao Wei didn't reply. She was seriously considering whether Luzin had a point. Then she grabbed a few more pens and put them into her bag. This office also had 2 side rooms, one on the left and one on the right. There were no metal doors, but both were locked. The doors were well made. Luzin and Yao Wei noticed chairs placed near them, and both doors bore marks of being beaten against, yet they remained intact, firmly securing whatever was inside. Both doors had regular locks, which meant the mechanical dog couldn't help here. No keys were inserted into the locks. Judging by the damage from the trapped people trying to break in, they clearly hadn't found the keys outside either. Unlocking them normally didn't seem like an option. "You think we can strength brings miracles these doors open too?" Luzin was itching to try. But before he could do anything, Yao Wei had already acted first. She raised her leg, causing her previously loose pants to stretch taut, outlining a sleek, well-defined curve. Then, with a kick as fluid as a dance move. Boom. The door crashed down, slamming onto the floor inside. The frame twisted out of shape where it connected, and the lock hole was completely destroyed. Luzin stared in shock. He couldn't help but say, "Impressive." Yao Wei nodded, accepting the praise without hesitation, then stepped inside with Luzin. Inside was likely the office of someone in charge. The space wasn't large, but it had a desk, chairs, a computer, and notebooks. Almost identical to the main office outside, only untouched and undamaged. It seemed that after this place was built and furnished, no one had ever come in. The person responsible for overseeing the shelter had never even had the chance to settle in before being cut off outside. Luzin tried having Dog open the outlet panel and plugged in the computer's power. The system booted up, but it was completely fresh. There was nothing inside. Sigh, what a waste. He sighed and unplugged the power. The computer was valuable, but carrying it around was useless. No choice but to leave it. "Let's check the other side room," he said. So, the 2 of them and the mechanical dog left for the room across the hall. Luzin stepped aside and said to Yao Wei, "Go ahead." He thought her movements were clean, efficient, and had a rhythmic elegance to them. Pretty nice to watch. Yao didn't hesitate. She kicked the second door open just like before. But this room wasn't an office anymore. As Dog's scanning light swept across, Luzin quickly confirmed. It was a surveillance room, an electrical panel room, and also a storage room. One glance from Dog revealed a pile of tools and miscellaneous supplies stacked in the corner. An electrical panel was mounted on the wall, closed for now. A toolbox sat nearby, its lid shut, but a key was still stuck in the lock. On another wall, a massive screen was connected by cables to a rectangular device on the desk. Likely the surveillance system's main unit. Luzin thought for a moment, then picked up the mechanical dog, opened the electrical panel, and said, "Let's see if we can get power running." Dog extended black cables from its sides, connecting them to the electrical panel. Zzzzz. Immediately, faint light seeped in from outside the room. Luzin stepped out to check. The light was coming from the corridor. The office itself remained dark. But this was enough to confirm that the underground shelter's electrical system was still in working condition. He found the switch on the wall under the dim light and pressed it, instantly lighting up the surveillance room. Then, he fumbled around on the surveillance system's main unit, pressing a button on the back. The unit powered on. The large display screen on the wall was already in an active state, with a red light glowing in the bottom right corner after receiving power. As soon as the main unit turned on, the light began to flicker. Whether an image would appear was still uncertain. Yao glanced at Luzin, her expression odd. She actually wanted to ask, "How do you know how to do everything? Even this?" But before she could, Luzin saw her look and answered, "Just curious. Wanted to see what those two did in here, if they left any footage." Chapter 22, A Bountiful Departure. The surveillance system's main unit had been collecting dust for years. When it powered on, it let out a strained groan, buzzing intermittently. Bzzz. Bzzz. Like heavy panting, before finally settling into a long, continuous bzzz. As a result, the boot-up process was painfully slow, and the display screen on the wall flickered on and off for quite some time before proving it was still functional. But at least it could still start up. Clearly, this main unit was of lower quality compared to the computers in the office, which had booted up just fine. Though, those computers had turned out to be empty and utterly useless to Luzin and Yao. The two of them waited for a long time before the screen finally lit up completely, showing a 4x3 12-panel display. One camera at the tunnel entrance, one at a corner, one at the middle section, and one at the end. Two cameras in the outermost rest area of the shelter, positioned diagonally opposite each other. Two in the hallway, one on each side. Two in the kitchen, one in the office, and one in the conference room. There were no cameras in the dormitory, the administrator's office, or the bathroom. It seemed that, according to the shelter's management, the most crucial areas to monitor were the public spaces and the kitchen. There was no password protection on the surveillance system, so Luzin easily accessed the archive and started reviewing the stored footage. The records went back 3 months, so he scrolled to the earliest available footage. By then, the two trapped people were already wandering inside. The kitchen was a mess, though not quite as chaotic as what they had seen. Any earlier footage had already been overwritten. Every day, the two people would go to the tunnel entrance, bringing different tools. Handcarts, shovels, hammers. But none of it made any difference. Yet even after giving up, they still went to check the tunnel entrance every day, only to leave in disappointment. Luzin noticed that at some point, they had stopped adding numbers to the conference room's blackboard. The surveillance footage didn't provide a clear view of the numbers, but it was obvious there were now 2 full rows written. Clearly, they had been trapped in there for a long time. The footage was playing at 16x speed, and whenever nothing was happening, Luzin would fast forward even more. By day 6, the kitchen's food storage was completely depleted. The two people tried turning the mechanical combination lock on the metal door, but it didn't work. They moved the remaining food into the dormitory. After that, they kept trying the metal door daily. Sometimes multiple times a day. By day 10, they had stopped entering the kitchen altogether. On day 12, one of them returned to the kitchen, hammer in hand, and frantically pounded on the cold storage's metal door. To no avail. On day 13, that person killed themselves right in front of the metal door. When they collapsed, their face hit the door, leaving a bloody smear as their body slid down. The other person came in, glanced at the scene, but didn't say anything. No reaction. They just looked at the body, then turned around and left, heading back to the dormitory. That person was never seen again. From then on, the footage became completely silent. Until the screen eventually went black. Luzin exhaled after watching everything at the fastest possible speed. Though he hadn't found any particularly valuable information, he still couldn't help but feel a little somber. He let out a sigh. "Let's go." He put Dog down, letting it light the way out. Yao nodded and followed behind Luzin and Dog. When they reached the kitchen, they each carried 2 bags of rice and 1 bag of millet out. Since the bags were vacuum sealed, the volume wasn't too large. 4 bags of rice and 2 bags of millet fit easily in the car. After transporting the supplies to the tunnel entrance, they carried them up the stairs and set them down. Then, Luzin and Yao went back the same way and retrieved 1.5 boxes of dehydrated vegetables and half a box of sausages. Unfortunately, Yao's car wasn't very big, and it was already loaded with plenty of other stuff. If they took too much more, they wouldn't be able to fit it. They had to stop here. Luzin also picked up a flat-bottomed pan, a spoon, and a jug of oil. He placed a bag of salt, a bag of sugar, and a bottle of soy sauce onto the pan and carried them all together. Everything was still perfectly sealed. Though the expiration dates were long past, Luzin had Dog check. They were still safe to eat, so they had to take them. If expired food wasn't edible, then in this apocalypse, they would have starved long ago. It was a pity there was no cumin here. Otherwise, they would have grabbed some too. After collecting everything, the 2 of them left the cold storage. Luzin shut the metal door behind them and locked it, while Yao took out her world atlas and marked a circle at the entrance of Dan village. This would be their supply base in the future. If they ever needed to restock, they could come back here. Luzin then picked up a hammer and strapped it to his waist before leaving the shelter with a mountain of supplies alongside Yao. The hammer had been left in the kitchen. According to the surveillance footage, the former cook, Ligzun, had used this very hammer to pound at the metal door for ages. It couldn't break through that metal door, but it could still be useful for smashing other things. And in an emergency, it made for a decent hidden weapon. Luzin figured it would come in handy, so he took it. At the tunnel entrance, after setting everything down, he suddenly thought of something and asked Yao, "Hey, should we grab a couple of blankets from the dorms? We can use them for sleeping." "Definitely." Yao nodded without hesitation, as if she had already thought of it but hadn't gotten around to it yet. Luzin figured that made sense. Anything that could keep them warm was top-tier survival gear in this world. There was no way Yao would overlook it. They went back into the shelter one last time, grabbing 2 blankets from the nearest dormitory, but nothing else. They couldn't take too much, or Yao's car wouldn't be able to hold it all. Thankfully, the blankets weren't too thick. They were a solid blue color, with a thin inner lining, incredibly lightweight. They felt like down blankets, meaning they would provide excellent warmth. They were exactly what they needed. So, all in all, this trip to the shelter had turned out to be a massive haul. Back at the tunnel entrance, they climbed the stairs. Luzin had Dog scan through the walls to confirm that nothing dangerous was outside before removing a stone to take a look. Once he was absolutely sure it was safe, they unsealed the entrance, moving aside all the blocking stones. "I'll move the stuff outside, you get the car over here." After a final check of the surroundings, Luzin said. Yao had no objections. She responded, then ran off to get the car. Luzin moved all the supplies out of the tunnel, then sealed the entrance shut again, packing the rocks in tight and camouflaging the surface. He was confident. Without prior knowledge, no one would ever find this place. Even if someone did stumble upon it, they wouldn't know where to pry it open. And without new human strength, they wouldn't have the power to move the stones anyway. Only then did he feel at ease. The trunk was now nearly full. The blankets, along with 2 crates of dehydrated vegetables and sausages, had to be placed in the back seat instead. Looking at their fully loaded car, both of them felt immensely satisfied. "All right, let's go. We'll refuel, drive until nightfall, find a safe spot, and I'll cook you a feast." Chapter 23, Cooking by the Stream. There were indeed people in Fengjing County. When Luzin and Yao were driving near the entrance of Fengjing County, they saw a large roundabout. A statue stood in the middle of the roundabout, at least 5 stories high, narrow at the top and wide at the bottom, with strange curves. Its original appearance was no longer discernible. A massive, tattered white cloth was draped over it, fluttering wildly in the wind, like a huge flag. On the flag, bold and ugly black characters read, "Fengjing Nu Gang, Prosperity and Happiness, welcome to join us." The 2 of them looked at it from afar with binoculars and fell silent for a moment. After a long pause, Luzin commented, "Whoever made that flag sure is something else." Yao. She put away the binoculars, placed her hands on the steering wheel, and prepared to leave. Luzin said, "Who knows if the people inside can be trusted? Let's go around them." Yao nodded, agreeing with Luzin's suggestion. It was obvious that there were quite a few people in the city, and they weren't sure if entering would be like sheep walking into a tiger's den. The people in the county town had raised a white flag, seemingly signaling friendliness, but who knew if it was genuine or a trap? Besides, they had already scavenged enough supplies, so there was no need to enter the city. Going in now would be like flaunting treasure in a crowded market. Not worth the risk. So Yao drove onto another road, but even then, she remained extremely cautious the entire way. Luzin sat in the front passenger seat, periodically using the binoculars to scan ahead and to the sides, ensuring their safety. They chose a route with mountain forests blocking the view. The road wasn't great. Bumpy and jarring, making the ride uncomfortable. But at least it kept them away from the county and shielded by the low mountains. Even if someone in the city was watching from a high vantage point with binoculars, they wouldn't be able to see them. I haven't encountered this kind of situation before. The north has barely any people, let alone such large settlements. As they drove over a particularly rough dirt road, the tires kicked up a cloud of dust, obscuring his view. Luzin had to lower his binoculars. With nothing else to do, he started talking. After saying that, he curiously asked Yao, "Is the south the same? Do people just gather like this and put up flags?" "No." Yao's response was brief and to the point. But she didn't elaborate on what the people in the south were like. Mentioning the south seemed to put her in a bad mood. Her driving sped up, as if she was looking for something to crash into. Luzin guessed it had something to do with her mother's death, which made Yao deeply resentful of people from the south. Didn't matter, as long as she didn't resent him enough to kick him out of the car. Having a ride was still a good deal. They drove a long way, but Yao's car had a huge fuel tank, and the fuel gauge needle had barely moved. Fengzheng County had long since disappeared from sight, and no one had come after them. Maybe their choice of a concealed route had paid off. By now, it was afternoon. There was still some time before dark, but Yao decided to stop. Lighting a fire after dark might attract unwanted attention, so they planned to cook dinner before nightfall and eat quickly. Ahead, the road intersected with a small river. The river was so tiny and shallow that it didn't even have a name on the map. After some discussion, they left the road, following the river upstream until they found a concealed yet accessible spot where they could quickly drive off if needed. Once they confirmed the area was safe, Luzin got to work. "Dogsy, keep watch." He called out to the mechanical dog, and Dogsy immediately began patrolling the area to ensure security. Meanwhile, Luzin went to the river, washed the flat-bottomed pan and the spoon, then found a smooth, wide stone that had been polished by the water. After giving it a good rinse, he decided to use it as a cutting board. While he prepared, Yao went to chop some firewood and set up a fire pit. They had already stocked some firewood in the car, but since there was plenty available nearby, there was no need to waste their stored supply. Last time, this had been Luzin's task, but this time, Yao took over. When she finished stacking the wood, she noticed that Luzin had placed the pork on the clean, smooth stone but wasn't cutting it. Instead, he was staring at the river. Curious, she walked over and followed his gaze into the water, but she didn't see anything unusual. "How about we skip the pork for this meal? Let's save it for later," Luzin suddenly suggested, his eyes still fixed on the river. Yao had no objections. As long as she could replenish her energy, she was fine with saving resources when possible. But she still didn't understand what he was looking at. The river was shallow and crystal clear. There were no fish, only some shrimp. But those shrimp were tiny. Not enough to fill a stomach. Besides, she didn't know how to prepare them. Did Luzin know? This guy seemed to know how to do everything. "Dogsy, come here." Luzin called the mechanical dog over. Yao decided to stay quiet and let Luzin handle it. Then, she watched as Luzin scooped the spoon into the river at lightning speed. A bunch of shrimp didn't even have time to escape before being caught. If brute force counted as a miracle, this was it. "Check if they're edible." Luzin held the spoon up to the mechanical dog. Yao pressed her lips together. This guy really planned on eating shrimp. Dogsy scanned them with its eyes, then its sensors lit up. That was enough for Luzin. He began scooping shrimp out of the river, draining the water, and tossing them into the pan. Calling it scooping was a stretch. It was more like an ambush. He relied on his sheer strength and speed to snatch shrimp before they could react. Because of that, he had to keep switching locations to ambush the panicked shrimp. With no suitable net on hand, this was the best method he could use. After several scoops, he turned to Yao. "Want to take over? I'll cook the rice." Yao agreed without hesitation. She had already figured out the trick and, as a fellow new human, she could do this just as well. Now, she was curious. How was Luzin going to cook these shrimp? If he could really pull it off, she definitely wanted to try it. That would mean another option for replenishing energy in the future. So Luzin handed the task over to Yao and went to fetch her pot from the car. The pot had originally been filled with water. Since they had been using the pot's water for drinking, their bottles were full, but the pot was now partially empty. The remaining water was just enough to cook rice. Luzin opened a vacuum-sealed bag of rice, poured out enough for 2 portions, and put it into the pot. The water covered the rice by about 2 fingers width. Just the right amount. Then, he lit the fire and started cooking. Chapter 24, Rice and Shrimp. Yao Wei's pot didn't have a lid, but the flat-bottomed pan was just the right size to cover it. So Luzin asked Yao Wei, "Do you have something suitable to hold these river shrimp?" Yao Wei found her bowl in the car, washed it, and handed it to Luzin. Luzin sighed. He hadn't expected Yao Wei to have a bowl. What a pity that all the bowls in the shelter at Dan Village's entrance had been porcelain. They'd all been smashed by those 2 people. "If you have a bowl, then I'll take this flat-bottomed pan as mine. I'll use it as a bowl from now on, all right?" he asked. "Okay." Yao Wei nodded, having no objections. With limited resources, everything had to be utilized to the fullest. Luzin poured the shrimp from the pan into Yao Wei's bowl, then took the pan and placed it steadily over the pot to prevent steam from escaping too quickly, which would slow the rice from cooking. Yao Wei simply took the bowl to the river, scooping out small river shrimp 1 spoonful at a time, draining the water, and transferring them to the bowl. This way, she didn't have to keep running back and forth to the pot. But with the shrimp in the river constantly being ambushed, they had become extremely wary. It was getting harder and harder for Yao Wei to catch them, and she had to go farther and farther to find more. Fortunately, she had incredible patience. Even if she had to go a bit farther and wait longer, she remained focused. So, the number of shrimp in the bowl kept increasing under her careful work. As she walked farther away, the aroma of the cooking rice gradually reached her, making her involuntarily swallow. Luzin found her reaction amusing. Then, he swallowed, too. It had been so long since he had smelled such a fragrance. Ever since leaving the north and departing from Wanhikun in Dongmen County, he hadn't scavenged any edible rice. He had found some in certain places, but due to the unpredictable weather, they had long since gone bad. Even after Dogsy's inspection, they were deemed inedible. Even the rice they had discovered in the cellar of Wanhikun in Dongmen County had been frozen for who knew how long. It was old and stale. It couldn't compare to the richer aroma of this vacuum-sealed rice, which had been preserved until now. Just a little longer, just a little longer. Luzin lifted the flat-bottomed pan to check. The rice was almost done, but it could use a little more cooking. By now, the sky had darkened slightly, but it wasn't fully night yet. The firewood would last a little longer. "Don't rush, I'll stir-fry the shrimp for you after this," Luzin told Yao Wei. Yao Wei nodded, setting the bowl down and kneeling by the fire to add and adjust the wood. That was a skill Luzin hadn't mastered yet. He had started fires for warmth before, but his method had always been crude. After all, in his past life, he had never experienced these kinds of hardships. It was only after arriving in this world that he slowly figured things out and gained some experience. Watching Yao Wei work, he observed closely, taking the chance to learn. Under Yao Wei's adjustments, the fire burned stronger, and soon, the rice was fully cooked. Luzin lifted the pot and set it aside, then placed the flat-bottomed pan on the fire rack. The moisture left in the pan from the shrimp had already evaporated, but the bottom had collected a few water droplets from sitting on the rice pot. Now, under the fire's heat, those droplets quickly disappeared. The pan was already warm. Hot pan, cold oil. No need to wait. Luzin had Yao Wei retrieve oil, salt, and soy sauce from the car. He poured a little oil into the pan, heated it slightly, then tossed in the shrimp and started stirring. He didn't have many seasonings on hand. The supplies in the shelter were lacking in variety. Perhaps people in the old world had been too rushed when preparing for disaster to stock up properly. Fortunately, stir-fried dried shrimp didn't require much seasoning. A simple preparation was enough. Actually, pork can be used to extract oil, too. Wild boar meat is a bit tough, but as long as it has some fat, it should work. As Luzin stirred the shrimp, he continued, other animals should work, too. Chicken, dog, beef, lamb. If we ever run out of oil, we can hunt and extract our own. Yao Wei nodded seriously, focusing intently on Luzin's cooking technique. Earlier, Luzin had been watching her to learn. Now, it was her turn to observe and study. Stir-frying river shrimp didn't take long. In no time, they turned a bright red, and the scent of shrimp mixed with the aroma of oil, making both Yao Wei and Luzin instinctively take deep breaths. Then, Luzin drizzled soy sauce over the shrimp, sprinkled some salt, gave it another stir, and just like that, the dish was done. Yao Wei had already washed and dried the spoon. Luzin took it, scooped up a small portion of shrimp, and tasted it. The flavor was just right. Seemed like he had seasoned it well. All done, mission accomplished. The long-lost pleasure of good food lifted Luzin's mood. He took Yao Wei's bowl and filled it with rice, then topped it with shrimp. Just like that, a bowl of stir-fried shrimp over rice was ready. Looking at the steaming dish. white rice covered with bright red shrimp. Luzin felt an unexpected sense of accomplishment. In this kind of world, in this kind of environment, being able to cook something like this. It wasn't easy at all. Here. He handed the bowl to Yao. Yao had already fetched her own spoon from the car and washed it clean. She glanced at the bowl Luzin was offering, then at the flat-bottomed pan. Finally, she placed her spoon into the pan and said, "You use the bowl, I'll eat from the pan." Eating straight from the pan didn't seem convenient. Luzin, however, just chuckled and said, "It's fine, I'm used to this. I used to eat from plates. It's not much different from a pan." With that, he firmly shoved the bowl into Yao's hands. Yao was curious about when and where Luzin had been eating from plates, but she wasn't one to ask unnecessary questions. She watched as Luzin dumped the remaining rice into the pan, mixing it with the stir-fried shrimp to eat. Seeing this, she gave up on returning the bowl to him. "It's dark now." She looked up at the sky and said. Luzin understood what she meant. The two of them worked together to put out the fire. The sky wasn't completely dark yet, but with the sun setting, their surroundings were dim. The firewood was now a pile of blackened remains, not a single ember left. Yet, the charred wood still radiated residual warmth. They sat beside the firewood pile, letting the night envelop them, eating their meal under the faint starlight. Compared to the food in his past life, this bowl of stir-fried shrimp with rice wasn't exactly gourmet. The shrimp was a bit tough and dry. Not the best dish to pair with rice. Back in his past life, when he ate rice, his favorite pairings were vinegar stir-fried shredded potatoes and scrambled eggs with tomatoes. But this wasn't the past life. How could he still have such high expectations? This bowl of stir-fried shrimp with rice had oil, meat, and even fresh river shrimp. Plus, it had rice, replenishing carbohydrates. In this kind of world, what could be a better meal than this? "How is it?" As they ate heartily, Luzin asked. Yao's mouth was full, and her reply was muffled. Chapter 25, Starlit Sky and Sunroof. Dinner was finished quickly. The two of them cleaned up the dishes together, replenished their water from the small river, and put it in the car. The water in the river had already been checked by dog, so for Luzin and Yao, drinking it was no problem. In these harsh conditions of the apocalypse, they couldn't afford to be picky. If the river water was usable, they would use it. After everything was packed up, Yao drove the car a little further away, found a decent spot, parked, turned off the engine, and took the blanket scavenged from the shelter to cover herself, getting ready to sleep. There were too many mosquitoes near the water, making it unsuitable for resting. If they were to set up a long-term base, the best choice would be a slightly elevated location with cover for concealment, a nearby water source, but still some distance away from it. Both of them had been surviving alone in this world for quite a while, so they knew the basics of survival. But right now, they were on the road and didn't need a long-term base. So after eating by the water, they simply found another place to rest. Reclining the driver's and front passenger's seats, Luzin let himself fall back. The soft and thin but warm blanket covered his body, leaving only his head exposed. He couldn't help but let out a groan and said, "So comfortable." Yao wasn't as expressive as Luzin, but she agreed with his statement. Having these two blankets was much better than just covering themselves with clothes. Especially since her outer coat was leather. Stiff material, completely incomparable to a blanket. But Luzin still wasn't entirely satisfied. With blankets like these, stripping down completely and letting his body fully embrace the softness would be the ultimate luxury. However, given their current circumstances, it was completely inappropriate. Whether considering the difference between men and women or safety concerns. The stars look pretty good tonight. If your car had a sunroof, it'd be perfect? Since he wasn't sleepy yet, he started making small talk with Yao. The night deepened, and the sky was no longer just dotted with a few stars. As the darkness thickened, more and more stars emerged. From the outside, the sky was now densely filled with stars, making the night's visibility not too bad. Yao responded, also noticing how nice the starlight was outside. Then she added, "There used to be a sunroof, but it wasn't sturdy, so I replaced it." Luzin widened his eyes and examined the roof of the car. It didn't look like there were any visible seams. After thinking for a moment, he understood and asked, "You changed cars?" Yao answered again and explained, "The old car wasn't good. Small fuel tank, guzzled gas, and wasn't sturdy. Later, I found this one. It was still drivable, so I swapped." Luzin said, "You're really lucky." He had been traveling south from the north for almost a year and had yet to come across a single drivable car. It wasn't that he hadn't seen cars along the way, but there was always some problem. Either here or there. And the issues were never small. Even piecing together parts to build a working car wasn't possible. But Yao didn't agree with Luzin's view. She glanced at the mechanical dog and said, "Not as lucky as you." Luzin laughed and said, "Fair enough. But look at us now. We make a good team. I get to hitch a ride in your car, and you get to hitch a ride with dog." Yahweh thought for a moment, seemed to find his words reasonable, and nodded. Neither of them mentioned their previous agreement. Before Luzin got in the car, he and Yahweh had agreed that he would get off once they found a suitable place to live. After that, they stopped talking, closed their eyes, and fell asleep not long after. This sleep was much better than the night before. When they woke up, the weather remained unchanged, and there were no wild animals outside. The air conditioner sat quietly, never needed. They drove back to the river, confirmed it was safe, set up the fire rack, grilled the remaining pork, then each took care of personal matters before returning to finish off the roasted meat. The weather had been nice for the past couple of days, but the meat had been sitting in the car for a whole day. If they didn't eat it now, it would spoil. Eating it now was the best choice. Surviving in this world had long changed Luzin's old habits. He no longer followed the 3 meals a day routine. 2 meals a day, morning and evening, was normal. If food was scarce, even 1 meal a day was common. So before setting off in the morning, filling their stomachs and replenishing energy was the most sensible thing to do. Then, they set off, continuing west. After passing Fengzheng County and traveling quite a bit further, they reached another city district. Luzin checked the map. It was marked as Mengxin City. Between the two cities, there was a highway called Jiangjiang Expressway, with a service area in the middle that had a gas station. If they took the highway, they could cut their travel time in half. After looking at the map, Luzin told Yahweh about it. But Yahweh said it was best not to take the highway. The situation there was uncertain, with no alternative routes to take. Guardrails lined the sides of the road, so if the path was blocked, they would have no choice but to turn back. If someone had taken control of the highway, there would be nowhere to hide. And if danger arose, they might be forced to abandon the car and flee. If that happened, all the supplies in the car would be lost. Luzin had always traveled on foot before and had never taken the highway or driven a car, so he hadn't considered these issues. Hearing Yahweh's reasoning, he thought about it and found it quite logical. He had no objections. So, they took another route, switching from a provincial road to a county road. There were several gas stations along the way. As they passed by, they carefully checked each one. Some were intact and usable, while others were completely abandoned. But at least they managed to refuel. However, when they reached the county road entrance, they hadn't expected to find 3 or 4 people occupying the gas station there. Unlike the group in Jijia village of Fengzheng County, these people didn't start shooting on sight. Instead, when they saw the approaching car, they hid. Even so, Luzin and Yahweh chose to avoid the place and didn't stop at the gas station. Both of them followed the principle of avoiding conflict whenever possible. In this apocalypse, the best option was to avoid unnecessary interactions with people and not provoke the already tense and fragile nerves of survivors. But after passing another gas station on the county road, they still couldn't avoid an encounter. They hadn't sought out anyone, but someone had sought them out. Beep, beep, beep. The county road wasn't too narrow, but it wasn't very wide either. 2 cars could travel side by side, and there was an emergency lane on the inner side for stopping. Yahweh was driving in the center lane when suddenly, a car horn blared from behind. She glanced at the rear-view mirror. Luzin also turned his head and saw a sedan speeding toward them. Without hesitation, Yahweh floored the gas pedal. But this off-road-capable vehicle was no match for the speed of a sedan. The sedan accelerated, closing the distance between them. Then, they heard a loudspeaker voice from the sedan behind. The car in front, "Want to trade?" Chapter 26, terminating the deal. The loudspeaker on the car behind them wasn't of great quality. The sound came through loud, but it was distorted, making it hard to distinguish the man's voice. Luzin glanced back again and saw a speaker mounted on the car's roof, likely connected to the interior wiring. There seemed to be only one person inside the car. The front passenger seat was empty, and no heads were visible in the back. But Luzin and Yahweh didn't rule out the possibility that someone was crouching in the passenger seat or back seat, waiting to ambush them. Luzin raised his submachine gun. Trade time. Anyone got something to trade? Car parts, food, clothing. It's all good. I've got some premium stuff here. Want cigarettes? How about cola? Hey, ever had cola before? It's fizzy. 1 sip, and damn, it's amazing. I guarantee it'll lift your spirits. No more suicidal thoughts. Same with cigarettes. 1 puff, and you're in heaven. Car in front, slow down a bit. But let's be clear up front. Don't even think about robbing me. I've got a gun. I've taken on 10 people by myself before. The guy in the car behind them was a total chatterbox, rambling endlessly through the loudspeaker. Luzin and Yao completely ignored him, keeping the gas pedal floored and driving forward. Then the guy sped up, pulling his car alongside Yao's, rolling down the window, and turning his face towards them with a big grin. His long hair was messy, his beard scruffy, and he wore sunglasses. His clothes weren't fully visible, but he seemed to be wearing a long overcoat, giving him a sharp, edgy look. Just as he was about to say something, Luzin raised his submachine gun and rested it on a car window. The man's eyes behind the sunglasses widened instantly. "Shit!" he blurted out before slamming the brakes and vanishing from Luzin's sight in an instant. But the car only fell behind them. It had no intention of retreating. The speaker on its roof blared again. "Bro, wanna trade that gun? I've got an airplane." Luzin fell silent, then turned to Yao and joked, "This guy is full of crap. If his car can fit an airplane, I'll trade my gun for it. A spatial treasure? Who wouldn't want that?" Yao chuckled and kept driving. But even as she drove, she freed one hand to grip her gun. She had never seen Luzin fire a gun before and wasn't entirely confident in his shooting skills. "Look. My airplane is top tier. Clean, still in its packaging. I'll even throw in batteries for free. How about that? Pretty generous, right?" The loudspeaker behind them started blaring again. Luzin turned his head to glance out the back window. From the driver's seat of the sedan, a hand extended out, holding a rectangular box. The box was tattered, with only half of it remaining. The bottom half revealed a slightly curved cylindrical object, resembling a cup. The top half of the box had an image of a naked body. He instantly recognized what it was and asked Yao, "You guys call this thing an airplane here?" Yao glanced at it through the rearview mirror. "The box says airplane." "Alright then." Luzin then noticed that, sure enough, the remaining part of the box had the characters for airplane on it. Below those characters, there was probably supposed to be the word cup, but it was already missing. Taking a closer look, he raised his voice and shouted, "You don't see the word cup on that thing? Trying to pass off an airplane cup as an actual airplane? Keep dreaming. Not buying. Get lost. Be careful. Don't provoke him," Yao reminded him. She always stayed rational, avoiding unnecessary conflicts. Luzin replied, "Sorry, I lost my cool for a moment. This guy got under my skin. But he doesn't seem like the type to start shooting over a few words." Still, he kept a firm grip on his submachine gun, slightly angling the barrel backward, ready to fire at any moment. However, the man in the car behind them didn't seem angry. After a brief silence, his voice came through the loudspeaker again, "Damn. Bro, you speak other languages too? I've got books in different languages. Wanna take a look?" The man pulled his hand back, then quickly stuck it out again, now holding a book. Worn and tattered, its edges curled up. The cover was pitch black, but a scantily clad woman in a seductive pose was still visible. She had golden, wavy hair, and across her hair was the English title, Playboy. Damn. Where did this guy scavenge these treasures from? So this world has Playboy too? Though, compared to the one from his past life, this version of Playboy looked way more premium. Come on, bro, just take a look. Bro, this is the real deal. Top tier stuff. In times like these, you don't just stumble upon treasures like this. Bro, you're a man, aren't you? The loudspeaker kept blaring, and that old, worn-out Playboy flapped in the wind like a flag. Yao frowned, feeling irritated. She considered slamming the brakes and ramming the back of that sedan hard. Her car was much sturdier than the sedan. If they crashed, the sedan would take the worst hit. But in the end, it wasn't worth it. How about I fire a shot? See if it scares him off? Luzin had given up trying to reason with the chatterbox. This guy was like an unshakable leech. No matter how rudely he was treated, he just kept latching on. Look at him. Clearly older than Luzin, yet he kept calling him bro like they were long-lost siblings. But before Luzin could fire, gunshots rang out. From ahead, not behind. Luzin and Yao immediately turned toward the sound. On the road ahead to their left, another car suddenly charged out, heading straight for them. Couldn't find a single car before, and now two show up at once? Luzin tensed up, feeling his heartbeat pounding. The loudspeaker behind them blared again, "Shit. These guys must have followed us from the highway and got ahead. Deal's off, bro, we'll talk some other time." In an instant, the engine behind them roared to life. The sedan accelerated sharply, overtaking them in a flash. That car's engine had definitely been modified. It wasn't stock. Luzin was sure of it. However, as the sedan sped off, the car from the left didn't chase it. Instead, it came straight at them. Bang. Bang. Two gunshots rang out, but the aim wasn't great. They didn't hit Yao's car. Luzin relaxed slightly. As long as they weren't as accurate as Yahweh, they weren't a serious threat. He didn't bother conserving ammo. From inside the car, he extended his gun out the window and pulled the trigger toward the incoming vehicle. Bang. 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 A burst of firepower. Half a magazine emptied in an instant. The gun barrel spewed flames, radiating intimidation. The car had screeched to a halt right in the middle of the road. Yahweh had no choice but to turn the steering wheel, veering off the road. Chapter 27, were pretty damn good. County roads mostly ran through rural areas. The roads in the countryside were decent, but once off the main highway, it was a different story. Yahweh's car smoothly veered off the highway, but ahead lay a ditch. If they went any further, the tires would definitely get stuck. Turning away from the highway, there was a long slope, and beyond that, a stream flowing from the east. Yahweh had no choice but to abandon moving forward and instead turn the car around. Luzin gripped the door handle to steady himself and glanced back. The vehicle blocking the road had stopped for a moment, seemingly hesitant. It was a white pickup truck, with half its paint peeled off and rust covering its body. The front bumper was heavily dented, clearly having been in multiple crashes. The truck bed had been modified with higher side panels, but only on the left and right, and they didn't match the vehicle. The cut marks were rough and jagged. Anyone brushing against them would likely get scratched. There were two gunmen, both crouched in the truck bed, aiming handguns over the low rear railing. Just like Luzin, neither of them exposed their heads, shooting blindly with only their hands out, aiming purely on instinct. Luzin let out a breath of relief. Looks like not everyone had Yahweh's accuracy. These guys were also using a pray and spray shooting style. That meant they were evenly matched, so he didn't have to worry too much about his own lack of accuracy. Besides, both of them looked old, with yellowed, crooked teeth when they spoke. They didn't seem like new humans, which meant they might be easier to deal with. After hesitating for a while, the truck still decided to give chase. Clearly unwilling to give up their new target, Luzin and Yahweh. Even though they knew Luzin had a submachine gun. How about we switch? I drive, you shoot? Luzin suggested. His aim was unreliable, and getting into a shootout with them would just come down to luck. It was better to leave the job to someone skilled. Driving, on the other hand. Though he hadn't touched a car since arriving in this world, he still had his past life's experience. And from what he had observed, the cars in this world operated the same way as in his previous life. No problem there. Yahweh glanced at Luzin, as if considering asking, "Can you even drive?" But then she thought about all the skills he had displayed over the past 2 days and decided against it. She simply trusted him. She shifted to neutral, let go of the gas pedal, and allowed the car to coast. Then, bending her legs, she crouched on the seat. Luzin caught on immediately. With a powerful push from his legs and a twist of his waist, he leaped toward the driver's seat like a monkey climbing a tree. Seamlessly transitioning into position. New humans had superior core strength, flexibility, and balance compared to their past selves, so this move was almost effortless for him. At the same time, Yahweh released the steering wheel, slipping past Luzin from behind. By the time Luzin had gripped the wheel and settled into the driver's seat, Yahweh was already in the front passenger seat. Their coordination was so smooth, it was as if they had done this countless times before. Their trust in each other was absolute. Here. Luzin tossed the submachine gun to Yahweh, while simultaneously pressing the clutch, grabbing the gear stick, estimating their speed, and shifting directly into 5th gear. Then, he slammed the gas pedal down hard. The car, which had slowed slightly, roared back to full speed. But Yahweh simply put the submachine gun aside, saying, "Not used to it," before pulling out her own handgun and sticking it out the window. Bang! A shot rang out. One of the pickup truck's tires burst instantly, deflating with a loud pop. The vehicle jolted and spun wildly before coming to an abrupt stop. One of the gunmen in the truck bed was thrown out, landing headfirst on a rock. Motionless. The other barely managed to hold on, nearly being flung out himself. "We're pretty damn good." Luzin grinned. Yahweh nodded in agreement. She had to admit, Luzin's driving skills were just as impressive as his cooking. Luzin asked, "Do we go back and finish them off or keep going?" The gun was in Yahweh's hands, and she was the better fighter, so he left the decision to her. "Go back. There are only 2 of them left." Yahweh answered decisively. She looked calm and composed, but her words carried a chilling killing intent. Luzin nodded. All right. It was undoubtedly the best choice. There was no way to know if the remaining men had backup. If they left now, those guys might call for reinforcements, and if they got surrounded later, things would get messy. Hyenas were already a pain to deal with when they only had their claws and fangs. Now that they had vehicles and guns, they had to be handled with extreme caution. Besides, Those men had already shot at them. Firing back was only fair. Luzin turned the wheel, making a U-turn. Then, Yao said, "Get back on the road." Without hesitation, he adjusted their direction, downshifted for the incline, and drove back onto the highway. Now, their car was facing the enemy vehicle that had veered off the road. Yao swiftly leaped into the backseat. Just behind Luzin, she rolled down the window and aimed her gun. Bang! A gunshot echoed. The remaining gunman in the truck bed had just managed to stabilize himself when Yao found her mark and put a bullet through his head. His body flipped out of the truck, lifeless. "Brake!" Yao ordered. At the same time, she used her free hand to brace against the backrest and extended her long leg to steady a box of dehydrated vegetables, preventing it from tumbling forward during the sudden stop. Without a second thought, Luzin released the gas pedal and slammed the brakes. The car slowed sharply, positioning the rear window perfectly toward the enemy's front seats. Yao wasted no time and pulled the trigger. Bang! One shot was all it took. The pickup was so battered it didn't even have a windshield. The bullet pierced through the passenger side window and buried itself into the driver's forehead, leaving a blood-spattered hole. Luzin had already brought the car to a full stop. Yao opened the door and jogged toward the truck with her gun raised. Luzin didn't follow. Instead, he grabbed the submachine gun from the passenger seat, resting it on the window frame to cover her. Both men in the truck already had their heads blown apart. Clearly dead. Yao ignored them and instead checked on the man who had been thrown out of the vehicle. She jogged over, saw that he was unconscious, and decided not to waste a bullet. Instead, she pulled the knife from her belt and slit his throat, carefully avoiding the blood splatter. Done. She stood up and called out to Luzin. Luzin stepped out of the car, with the mechanical dog following close behind. With the enemies dead, it was time to loot the corpses. This place wasn't safe to stay for long. Both of them had the same thought. Loot the corpses quickly and leave. Yao collected the 2 handguns from the bodies and also found 14 bullets. They were the same caliber as her handgun, making it quite a decent haul. Meanwhile, Luzin set his sights on the truck's tires and asked Yao, "Do you think these tires match our car's model? Should we take one as a spare?" Their luck was really good. Luzin took a look and saw that the pickup's tires were the same size, specifications, and tread pattern as theirs. They were likely a universal type. That meant they could use them as spares. Tire specifications and tread patterns were crucial. If even one of the 4 tires was different, it could affect traction, braking, and turning, potentially causing problems while driving. Yao examined the pickup's tires, then glanced at their car parked on the roadside. She nodded in agreement. Chapter 28, Peace Brings Wealth. Taking off a car wheel was simple. They didn't have a jack, but Yao's car did have a wrench for the tires. With sheer strength, Yao used the wrench to remove the screws from the wheel hub, stored them properly, and then Luzin directly lifted the car, allowing Yao to take off the wheel. The pickup truck also had some rope, but aside from that, there wasn't anything useful. Luzin guessed that the rope was originally used for tying people, but now it was perfect for securing the tire. Yao's car had a designated wheel rack in the back, but it was already being used to hold the external unit of an air conditioner. So, they had no choice but to secure the new tire they seized from the enemy's car onto the roof, tying it firmly with the pickup truck's rope, then got in the car, ready to set off. Before getting in, Luzin pulled the keys from the pickup truck and took them with him. Yao was puzzled. "What's the point of that?" Luzin smiled and said, "If these 3 guys have a spare tire, they could just replace it and keep chasing us, right? By taking their keys, we make sure they're completely stuck." Yao thought Luzin was overcomplicating things. She had already shot out 1 tire and removed another. What kind of people would have so many resources that they'd still have 2 usable tires? Then she heard Luzin continue, "Besides, this thing can be used as a hidden weapon. Don't you think?" Yao nodded in agreement. Luzin was the kind of guy who loved collecting hidden weapons. But just then, the roar of an engine sounded ahead. The sound was somewhat familiar. It sounded like that merchant guy from earlier. Without hesitation, Yao leaned out from the front passenger seat, raised her gun, and took aim. This time, she had given the driver's seat to Luzin and took responsibility for handling the gun from the front passenger seat. Screech. A sudden brake sent the approaching sedan skidding a long distance down the road, its tires even smoking. Sure enough, the familiar sedan reappeared, and from the car's rooftop loudspeaker came a man's voice, "Fuck." After that exclamation, the man quickly shouted, "Don't shoot. I mean no harm. I originally wanted to lead them away, but they didn't chase me, so I rushed back. These guys are insane. They attack anyone they see, no picking or choosing. They're not even human. Big bro, big sis, don't you think so?" Luzin didn't have a loudspeaker, so he had to raise his voice to reply, "Yeah, But we don't need anything from you. You better leave. The guy said, sorry, bro, I didn't notice earlier that you had a sis with you. The stuff I took before, you definitely don't need. But I have other good things that could make things more interesting. Luzin, if you don't leave now, I'll shoot. Alright. The guy quickly started his car and slowly drove past Yahweh's vehicle. As the two cars passed each other, the guy held the steering wheel with one hand while sticking the other hand out of the window, saying, big bro, big sis, look, I mean no harm. No need to get nervous, accidental gunfire would be bad for both of us. By the time he finished speaking, the two cars had already passed each other. Then, from the sedan's loudspeaker, the guy's voice came again, also, those guys set up roadblocks ahead. You can't get through here. I was running too fast earlier, almost couldn't brake in time, and my tires got wrecked by their ground spikes. Look at my car. I got shot at from behind. I didn't even have time to check if there are any holes. Luzin twitched his mouth. Now he understood why this guy, after seeing the situation, didn't just turn around and leave. He glanced at the rearview mirror and saw two small round holes in the back of the sedan. The edges of the holes were dented inward, irregularly shaped. It really looked like they were from bullets. He then looked at Yahweh. Seeing her nod, he didn't hesitate any longer, turned the wheel, and made a U-turn to catch up with the sedan. As their car pulled alongside the sedan, Yahweh had already pulled back inside, sitting sideways in the front passenger seat, aiming at the guy inside the sedan. The guy had just pulled his hand back inside to grab the wheel, but seeing this, he quickly stuck his hand out again. Big bro, big sis, let's talk this out. Peace brings wealth, peace brings wealth. His words and actions were all about showing submission, but Luzin and Yahweh weren't about to let their guard down. Luzin had already learned to read people's expressions. This guy sat upright, and although his teeth were a little uneven, they weren't yellow. There was a good chance he was also a new human. Just the fact that they were both new humans was enough reason to be cautious. Yahweh asked, who are those people? The guy replied, I don't know much, only that they're from Liang Shui village and don't get along with the people in the county. I went to their village to trade, but when they found out I had also been to the county, they suddenly attacked me. Luckily, I ran fast enough, or I'd be in deep trouble. But honestly, I think they would have attacked me even without that reason. These guys are shady. Way worse than the county folks. If they were decent, they wouldn't have switched targets so easily. No matter if I went after you guys or not, big bro, big sis, don't you think? After understanding the situation, Luzin asked, where are you planning to go? The guy replied, anywhere I can hide for a while. I originally planned to head south from the west, but now that's impossible. Liang Shui village must have blocked all the western routes. No way I can drive through. There aren't many roads westward. They just need a few checkpoints, and it's completely blocked. But I don't want to abandon my car and walk, so I'll just hide for now. Oh, right. Big bro, big sis, just a heads up. You guys shouldn't go back to the county either. The county folks are better than the Liang Shui village people, but they're not by much. They don't really follow rules. If we could come and go freely without causing trouble, it'd be fine. But given our situation now, they'll definitely team up with Liang Shui village, trap us, exhaust us, and then take our supplies when we're too weak to fight back. Luzin said, didn't you just say they don't get along? The guy replied, that doesn't stop them from teaming up against us. We're outnumbered and carrying supplies. The Liang Shui people have more people, but they're not necessarily better off than us. Once we're worn out, they can fight over our stuff, whether by strength or luck. We're new humans, and that alone makes them see us as enemies. Even if we don't think that way, they sure do. Luzin didn't ask any more questions. Up ahead, a fork in the road appeared. One path led into the countryside, the other continued along the county road. Luzin said, pick a road. He didn't plan on traveling with this guy. The guy said, you guys decide. I'm good with either. But before we part ways, how about a little trade? I've got some good stuff. Saying that, he pulled something out from his car. Check this out. A remote-controlled drone. I scaven. Traded for it from a refugee in the south. The battery's low, but it should still work a few times. When you're in a good mood, you can send a drone out to scout ahead, make sure it's safe. What do you think? Chapter 29, 1, 2, 3, Let's trade. Luzin and Yahweh focused their eyes on the object extending from the sedan. A small, delicate machine with a simple structure, well preserved, seemingly equipped with a camera, and fitted with 4 propellers. The machine was the same black color as the sedan, but much cleaner, as if it had been carefully wiped down to maintain its condition for resale. This thing is definitely useful, trust me. All the parts are intact, take a look. As the man spoke, he retracted his hand and switched to another item. The remote control. You can use this to operate the drone. It even has a small video screen that displays the footage captured by the drone in real time. This is good stuff. I don't usually show it to just anyone. So? Interested? Luzin was genuinely tempted. With this, scouting new areas would be much easier. It could work alongside Dog to expand their field of vision and ensure they didn't miss any blind spots. For places Dog couldn't reach, the drone could fly up and check. No need to risk human effort, ensuring their safety. But why was this guy willing to trade away such a good item? Could he have more than one drone? Luzin exchanged a glance with Yao Wei and noticed a hint of hesitation in her eyes as well. But neither of them could make up their minds right away. What do you think? Luzin asked Yao Wei. Yao Wei replied, what do we trade for it? So that was what she was struggling with. Yeah. We need to think carefully about that. Luzin sighed inwardly. The drone was too valuable. What did he and Yao Wei have that was worth trading for it? Instinctively, he glanced down at Yao Wei's feet in the front passenger seat. Dog was currently acting as a storage box. Absolutely not. Dog was crucial to him. Non-negotiable. As if sensing Luzin's gaze, Dog suddenly moved, shifting from a box back into its dog form. Its two eyes flashed, emitting a faint red glow. Luzin was slightly surprised. He had never seen the mechanical dog in this state before. Yao Wei was also puzzled and looked down. Seeming to realize something, she looked between Dog and the drone remote control in the man's hand. Big bro, big sis, are you interested or not? If you want it, I'll slow down, but if we keep driving, we'll be at those guys' base soon. The sedan's loudspeaker blared again. But Luzin ignored the man's shouts. Seeing Yao Wei's reaction, he understood something and asked Dog, what, you think this thing is useful too? Dog's eyes flashed brightly. That settled it for Luzin. The mechanical dog had never been wrong about assessing things before. If it thought the drone was useful, then it definitely was. And it would come in handy in the future. Though Dog's idea of useful might not align with Luzin's, he didn't mind trusting it. Yao Wei glanced at Luzin, as if reading something in his eyes, and made up her mind as well. She said, stop the car. I'll get out and talk to him. You stay in the car, keep the engine running. We need to be ready to leave at any time. Luzin was about to say, with your short and blunt way of speaking, how are you going to negotiate? But then he remembered that when the situation called for it, Yao Wei could talk plenty. Like just now. So he followed her plan, calling out loudly to the man, stop the car. Get out. The man asked, what about you two? Luzin replied, we'll get out together. Alright. After the confirmation from the sedan's loudspeaker, the car immediately came to a stop. Luzin also stepped on the brakes. The two vehicles were slightly staggered, one in front, one in the back. The sedan in front, Luzin's car behind. The man in the sedan, seeing that Yao Wei's car had stopped, said, I'll count to 3. On 3, we all open our doors. Then I'll count to 3 again, and we all show our hands first. Then one last time, we all step out together. Deal? Alright. Luzin agreed. Meanwhile, Yao Wei had already tucked her gun into a familiar spot at her waist, ensuring she could grab and draw it instantly if needed. The sedan driver began counting, 1, 2, 3. Click. The driver's side door of the sedan opened. At the same time, both the driver's and passenger's side doors of Yao Wei's car also opened. Yao Wei turned back to glance at Luzin. Luzin smiled and said, gotta make him feel at ease. I'm right here by the door. I can cover you, and if anything goes wrong, I can jump back in the car instantly. Yao Wei didn't respond. 1, 2, 3. The sedan's loudspeaker rang out the second count. 3 pairs of hands appeared. 2 from the sedan holding the drone and remote control, and 4 empty hands from Yao Wei's car. 1, 2, 3. At the third count, all 3 of them stepped out simultaneously. Luzin stood just outside his car door, not moving further. His hand was already resting on his submachine gun, hidden behind the car door where it wasn't visible. The man was indeed wearing a long coat. Tattered, filthy, but with his long hair and sunglasses, he still looked sharp and unruly. Grinning, he bared his slightly crooked teeth and said, finally, I meet some decent people. You guys are alright. Didn't just start shooting right away. Yao Wei didn't waste words and asked, what do you want? The man replied, mainly, I just want to make some friends. If you're willing to trade properly, then we can be friends. I'm very generous with friends. You show me what you have. I'm open to anything. Yao Wei thought for a moment and said, how about a gun? She had just looted 2 guns from the corpses earlier. She already had one in hand, so she didn't need that many at the moment. As for whether this guy would turn on her and loosen after getting a gun, she wasn't worried. She trusted her own strength. Besides, for a man carrying so many supplies and wandering alone, Yahweh didn't believe he was unarmed. The man hesitated slightly. Yahweh added, with a magazine full of bullets. She had scavenged 14 bullets earlier. The man said, I mean, you should give me the gun and bullets separately. Safety first, don't want any accidents. He really did seem like he wanted to make friends. But to Luzin and Yahweh, the drone was far more valuable than a gun. Could there be something wrong with the drone? Yahweh frowned slightly and said, make the machine fly. The man grinned. Relax, my goods are absolutely fine. Watch. He switched on the drone, placed it on the roof of the sedan, and operated it with the remote control. The drone worked perfectly. Its 4 propellers spun, lifting it into the air. Seeing this, Yahweh hesitated no longer. She had Luzin remove the magazine from the gun they had just seized in the car and handed it to her. She exchanged the gun for the drone, then traded the magazine and bullets for the remote control. Chapter 30, A Gift. The man completed the trade but showed no intention of leaving. He grinned and continued, Big sis, you're truly beautiful and kind, such a good person. He even made sure to include Luzin, big bro too. Luzin smiled and replied, you should be the big bro. You look older than me. And you too, big bro. Cool and kind, not something you see often these days. The man waved his hand and said, when wandering the world, everyone you meet is a big bro. My name is Luo King. How should I address you to? Luzin said, I'll tell you next time. Big bro sure is cautious. Luo Ping chuckled, seemingly unconcerned, and continued, this place is hard to enter and even harder to leave. Where are you planning to go? Standing in front of Luo Ping, Yahweh had already put the drone and remote control back in the car. Since Luzin had started talking, she remained silent. The trade was done, and conversations like this weren't her strong suit. It was better to leave it to Luzin. Besides, this guy was way better at socializing than she was. He always had something to say. If it weren't for Luzin, she probably wouldn't have even known how to start talking to him in the first place. Instead of answering, Luzin threw the question back, what about you? What's your plan? Luo Ping still didn't mind the counter question and said, what else? Of course, I'm gonna find a place to lay low for a while. This place is huge. No matter how many people they have, they can't cover it all. They can only guard the roads and wait for us. If we hold out longer than them, they'll run out of patience. They'll have to send people out to scavenge for supplies. Luzin nodded. Makes sense. And then? Then, if the timing is right, I'll get the hell out. Luo Ping grinned again, showing his uneven teeth. This guy seemed to always be smiling, using it as a way to express friendliness. Big bro, big sis, how about we team up? He suddenly added, I have a secret base down south, an absolutely amazing place, packed with treasures. Look at my car, look at the stuff I brought you. Survival there is no problem at all. Once we get through this, come back with me. You'll be living the good life. Luzin asked, if it's such a great place, why aren't you staying there? What are you doing out here? Luo Ping shook his head. Can't say, can't say. Luzin said, sorry, we're not looking to team up with anyone. With that, he called Yahweh to get in the car. Luo Ping quickly asked, are you really not gonna reconsider? I'm telling the truth. No lies. Luzin casually made something up, nah, we like traveling around. No plans to settle down. Luo Ping laughed. Big bro sure likes to joke. Who the hell enjoys traveling in times like these? Even lunatics wouldn't dare have that kind of hobby. Well then, this is where we part ways. Until we meet again. Luzin mimicked the phrase, when wandering the world, everyone you meet is a big bro, then shifted gears, stepped on the gas, and prepared to leave. But Luo Ping suddenly called out, wait. He quickly ran back to his car, grabbed something, and tossed it through the front passenger window. You guys are good people, so I'm giving you 2 extra things for free. 4 AA batteries, brand new. Enough to power your remote control for a long time. And a great book, full of useful knowledge. You can learn something new, have some fun. The front passenger window was open, not rolled up. The things Luo Ping threw landed directly in Yahweh's hands. The batteries were indeed brand new, still wrapped in transparent hard plastic. But the book? Yahweh barely glanced at it before immediately tossing it into the back seat, not daring to look any further. Luzin caught a glimpse of it from the corner of his eye and chuckled. The book Yahweh threw back had no cover, but from the contents, it was clearly a full-color comic. Each page was divided into 4 panels, filled with handsome men and beautiful women engaged in intense fights, making Yahweh's face flush red. This guy Luo Ping sure had a collection of wild stuff. Could it be that most of the treasures in his secret base were things like this? Yahweh was always frugal and hated waste. No matter how inappropriate the book was, she didn't throw it out the window. Instead, she just tossed it into the backseat. Luzin, on the other hand, was already planning to take a good look at it once they stopped. There were so few forms of entertainment left in this world. If he got his hands on something, he wasn't about to waste it by using it as kindling. What's our plan? Should we head west and check things out, or listen to Luoping and find a place to hide first? Luzin asked. Yahweh thought for a moment and said, hide first. Just in case he's telling the truth. Luzin nodded. Yeah, better safe than sorry. If he's telling the truth and we go west first, we'd just end up drawing fire away from him. Yahweh couldn't help but glance at Luzin. From the way he was talking, it seemed like he had picked up Luoping's speech patterns. After thinking for a moment, Luzin said, how about we go back to the shelter? We can stay there for a few days. It's not only safe, but we also don't have to worry about using up supplies. It's the perfect place to wait things out. The only problem is water, but the shelter is right next to the reservoir. Now that we have a drone, we can send it out to scout the area, make sure it's safe, then go fetch water. Right now, Luoping just got blocked off. The people in the county and the ones from Liang Shui village aren't working together, so word shouldn't spread too fast. If we're careful, we should still have time to make it back and hide. Yahweh had no objections. She nodded and said, okay. With both of them in agreement, they immediately set off. Yahweh checked the map and found a rural road to avoid Liang Shui village's blockade. Instead of heading west, they went back east. In truth, Liang Shui village wasn't likely to completely block the roads anytime soon. They had only just left the county. If they went further east, they'd be entering the county's territory. Until some kind of deal was made, Liang Shui village wouldn't dare to overstep too much. The car had enough fuel, and Luzin drove along the bumpy country road, avoiding both Liang Shui village's forces and detouring around Fengjing County and Jiejia village. He wondered if the people from Jiejia village were working with the county. Before long, they arrived at the entrance of Dan village. As before, they drove through first to scout the area. After confirming it was safe, they turned into a corridor between two houses and parked behind one of them. After getting out of the car, Luzin looked at the house and suddenly had an idea. What if we break open the back wall of this house and back the car inside? With a hillside behind us and nothing visible from either side, even if someone comes by, they won't find it at all. Chapter 31, Ultimate Enjoyment. This job still needed the mechanical dog to help. Dog took a look, and after confirming that breaking open the middle of the house's back wall wouldn't affect the load-bearing structure, Luzin and Yahweh started the work. For two new humans, this task was incredibly easy. They smashed the wall with a hammer, then carefully removed the bricks and soil around the opening bit by bit, expanding the entrance until it was done. However, when the opening was finally big enough for the car to fit through, they had another problem. The house had remained standing for so many years thanks to its reinforced concrete, but for the same reason, they couldn't level the ground at the entrance. If they drove the car in as it was, the exposed steel and concrete on the ground could damage the tires. But this wasn't a problem for Luzin. Luzin immediately suggested, let's just carry the car in? Yahweh nodded, not finding anything unusual about Luzin's suggestion. As new humans, they were strong enough to lift the car. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to clear the blocked shelter tunnel entrance that had been buried for years. The house's interior was just as expected. Messy. The scattered debris and empty space proved that it had already been looted. The sofa, beds, and similar furniture had likely been taken, and even the tables and chairs were gone. There was scattered black ash on the floor, along with a colorful piece of paper, its edges brown to gray and slightly curled, resembling a tiny, half-burned photo corpse. Someone had stayed here before and burned things for warmth. But judging by the traces, it had been a long time ago. This place was completely empty, just like Wanhyakun before. If not for Dog, it would have lost all value for scavenging, and no one would bother coming inside. Luzin first had Dog inspect the place. Once he confirmed there were no hidden compartments or safes, he and Yahweh lifted the car inside. Although they could lift a car that weighed several tons, it still took some effort. It wasn't as easy as the other things they did. After placing the car inside, they rested for a moment before unsealing the shelter tunnel entrance, transferring the supplies from the car into the tunnel, then stacking the removed bricks to roughly seal up the wall again. Only after all this was done did they enter the tunnel and seal the entrance from the inside. The wall obviously wasn't as seamless as before, but it was stacked well enough that from other angles, there was no noticeable difference. From this hidden perspective behind the wall, who would come over to check? We've come back here again. After sealing the exit inside the tunnel, Luzin couldn't help but sigh. Ever since we met, it feels like we keep revisiting the same places. Yahweh thought about the past 2 days, and her lips curved slightly. The two of them made several trips, moving everything from the tunnel entrance into the shelter. Luzin commanded, "Dog, connect the power supply." The shelter had already been confirmed as safe, so there was no need for Dog to continue scouting. Assigning it to power the place was the best choice. Dog immediately spun its wheels and sped off to the surveillance room, which doubled as the power supply room. In no time, the shelter's corridors and outermost rest area lit up. Luzin walked to the dormitory near the rest area, found the switch near the door, and flicked it on. The lights in the dormitory turned on. Under the bright light, the dormitory was neat and clean. The well-made beds were incredibly inviting, drawing Luzin over. The two outermost beds only had pillows, mattresses, and sheets left. The blankets had been taken to the car by Luzin and Yahweh. There were plenty of blankets in the shelter, so they hadn't bothered bringing them back from the car. Luzin turned and fell backward onto the bed, letting out a satisfied groan. So damn good. Nothing beat a bed. Even better than the big bed in the villa. After all, that mattress was already somewhat worn out. It wasn't exactly soft, nor was it firm. Just a bit better than sleeping on the ground. It was still lacking. But the beds and mattresses here were in perfect condition. Though a bit thin, they were soft enough for Luzin, making lying down the ultimate enjoyment. Yahweh followed Luzin's lead and lay down on another bed. The moment she lay down, she instantly understood why Luzin had made that noise. The mattress was so soft and comfortable that it instantly made her feel relaxed and lazy, making her not want to get up. She almost wanted to let out a sigh like Luzin had, but she held it in, feeling a little self-conscious. "Are you sleeping here tonight, or am I?" Luzin asked. Without hesitation, Yahweh said, "We're both sleeping here." Luzin replied, "There are plenty of dormitories. We can take separate rooms. It's rare to be this safe, and I want to sleep naked." When it was truly safe, nothing beats sleeping completely bare, wrapped in a blanket, enjoying the sensation of warmth gradually spreading through his skin, then stretching a leg or an arm. Or half his body. Outside the blanket, letting the cool air creep back in. That was the ultimate pleasure. In this apocalypse, traveling south from the north, he had always feared freezing to death, encountering people, or running into wild beasts. And without a proper bed or blanket, he never had the chance to enjoy this simple pleasure again. Now that they were going to stay in a confirmed safe shelter for a while, he wasn't about to let the opportunity slip away. Yahweh gave Luzin a strange look, as if she didn't understand what that had to do with anything. Seeing her expression, Luzin was momentarily stunned. Did this woman not even understand the concept of men and women keeping their distance? Then he heard Yahweh calmly say, "Go ahead and take your clothes off." Alright, so she really didn't get it. Thinking about it, that made sense. When they first met at the villa in Jiang District, Yubai City, Yahweh had been extremely wary of him. If not for the sudden hyena attack, she wouldn't have worked with him at all. Her marksmanship was excellent, her strength was immense, and she was incredibly decisive in a fight. She had probably never reached the point where someone taught her about keeping her distance from men. "I'll undress when it's time to sleep." Luzin lay on the bed for a while before sitting up. Inside the shelter, they couldn't see the sunlight, so he couldn't confirm the time. But it wasn't time to rest yet. Before sleeping, there was still a lot to prepare. First, they needed to find a few buckets for fetching water over the next few days. Then, they had to test the shelter's drainage system to ensure it still worked for disposing of waste. Next, the kitchen needed to be cleaned. There was still garbage from the cold storage room piled inside, which had to be dealt with. Finally, they needed to check if the old stove was still functional. If not, they'd have to figure out another way to cook. He started by going to the bathroom, using some water from a pot to flush the toilet. The water flowed smoothly, proving the system wasn't clogged. As long as they had water, the bathroom was fully usable. Then, he headed to the kitchen. As for the rotten garbage, it might be best to clear it out. Back in the cold storage, the airtight environment had kept the stench contained. But now, if they left that garbage inside the shelter, it could easily affect the air quality. Although this place had some kind of ventilation system that still kept the air circulating normally, it was still different from the outdoors. Having decayed waste in here definitely wasn't a good idea. Before leaving, Luzin had found several buckets stored in the bathroom corner. Carrying a few of them, he returned to the kitchen and started sorting through the garbage that needed to be thrown out. Yahweh followed him in and started helping. Most of the garbage was just decomposed food waste, and since the cold storage had once kept the temperature low, some of it hadn't rotted as completely as expected. But now that it was exposed to normal air, it was only a matter of time before it started smelling even worse. "Let's move these out first." Luzin picked up one of the buckets, while Yahweh grabbed another. After stepping outside the shelter, they chose a far enough spot and dumped the garbage out. Then they repeated the process until the entire kitchen was cleared. Only after confirming the air inside was no longer tainted with any rotting smell did they move on to the next step. "I'll check the stove." Luzin walked over and opened the kitchen's old stove, examining its condition. From the looks of it, this stove was an old-fashioned one that used wood or coal for fuel. If it was still functional, they wouldn't need to worry about cooking. He reached in and touched the inside. The firebox was intact, without any major cracks or damage. After a bit of testing, he confirmed that as long as they had firewood, the stove could be used normally. "We can cook with this." Yao Wei nodded. "Then we need to gather some firewood." "Right. And also some water." Luzin glanced at the buckets they had found earlier. Those would be useful for fetching and storing water. After confirming that the kitchen and stove were good to go, the next step was to ensure they had enough supplies for their stay. The shelter had provided them with a rare moment of security. Now, they just needed to make sure they could sustain themselves while they were here. Chapter 32, Inspiration 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Luzin counted. The buckets were stacked together, all made of iron, totaling 10 in number. He guessed they corresponded to the 10 dormitories inside the shelter. These might have been prepared for emergency use, but from the looks of it, they had never been needed. Additionally, there were 2 identical buckets in the kitchen, likely meant for kitchen use, but the 2 people who had been trapped here before had smashed them, rendering them useless. Luzin had previously searched every corner of the bathroom and had already taken note of these buckets. However, since Yao Wei's car no longer had room to store them, he had simply ignored the stack in the bathroom for the time being. But now, these 10 buckets could finally come in handy. "I have an idea." Luzin looked at the 10 buckets and suddenly spoke. "What is it?" Yao Wei asked. However, Luzin replied, "No rush. I'll explain later." Yao Wei. At that moment, she had the urge to point a gun at Luzin and demand he speak immediately. But that wasn't her style, so she forced herself to hold back. The 2 of them carried all the buckets to the bathroom entrance and then began tidying up the bathroom itself. They entered the cold storage room, emptied out a few boxes that had been holding dehydrated vegetables and sausages, and repurposed them for garbage disposal. All the kitchen waste that needed to be contained was packed into these boxes, and then they took turns carrying them to the tunnel entrance, moving the garbage there. Once all the garbage was relocated, the 2 of them grabbed a pair of iron shovels that had originally been used for cooking and set them aside for now. They also brought over the 10 newly discovered iron buckets. Opening a small gap at the exit, Luzin tried to control the drone, sending it outside to survey the area. The screen on the remote control lit up, displaying a shaky view as the drone flew outside. This was Luzin's first time operating a drone, so it didn't feel very intuitive. He couldn't maneuver it as naturally as his own limbs. But that was fine. They didn't need the drone to do much. Just to fly up high, scan the surroundings, and confirm that no one was nearby. Once the screen showed that the area was still deserted, Luzin and Yao Wei opened the hole and stepped outside. They found a spot, used the iron shovels to dig a pit, and buried all the garbage inside. For them, this task was just as easy as everything else. Although the dehydrated, shriveled rotten vegetables took up quite a bit of space, they weren't nearly as bulky as they had been when fresh. The most space-consuming garbage was actually the countless bags of flour. Once again, Luzin and Yao Wei's sheer strength worked miracles. A deep pit was quickly dug. They swiftly transferred all the garbage into the pit,